listeners, and welcome back to the Arrowverse Crossover Crisis Podcast with me, your host, Ashley. And today we are discussing Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 4. So, this is from Season 8, Episode 8 of Arrow. Now let's get into it. So, this episode opens up on planet Maltus. About 10,000 years ago, we meet the Monitor and his wife, and this is his home planet. And he's some sort of scientist with his wife, and he's doing time travel experiments. And it's really nice seeing the Monitor sort of as like a normal person. He doesn't have like the mutton chops. But this is kind of where he gets his suit, I guess, his costume, which is interesting. He mentions it's a little tight and constricting, which is I heard the actor says that it's kind of hard to move in that costume. And then of course, you know, it's just nice seeing him interact with his wife, and they're making jokes, and he's, you know, like, seems like a normal person, not like the serious Monitor. So this is a good opening. I really like it, and I like that it kind of sets up the Monitor and sets up how the Anti-Monitor came about, and the Anti-Universe, and how it's going to lead to, you know, the current crisis with the antimatter wave that happened. So this is all good stuff. And then, of course, he time travels to the dawn of time, and then that creates just his presence or something unleashes antimatter, and then he's in the antimatter universe at the dawn of time, and so we get Mar-Novu meeting the Anti-Monitor. So that's kind of a cool scene. I gotta say, this is kind of one of the better openings. It actually seems like it has something to do with the plot. It's just not a cameo of, you know, a previous DC Universe actor. This is actually something to do with the plot, and it's going to be critical to the rest of the crossover. So I like this opening a lot. And then, of course, we return to the vanishing point with the Paragons that are stuck. And we get Ryan Choi sort of doing a voiceover, kind of explaining what each of the Paragons are going through. He mentions that he and Lex Luthor are building some kind of device to try to escape, but he doesn't fully trust Lex Luthor, and Lex Luthor keeps you know, kind of shooting him down a little bit, making nasty compliments, like he's not smart enough, Ryan Choi, I mean. And then he mentions that Barry disappeared, and that got me thinking of, oh, well, that's the Flash vanishing in Crisis, right? He's literally at the vanishing point, and he vanishes from there, too. So that's kind of maybe a loophole around how Barry Allen's Flash vanishes in Crisis, even though we already addressed that it was Earth 90 Barry Allen that died in the Crisis last episode. But then we get Barry coming out of the Speed Force, and he doesn't realize that he's been gone for months. Ryan Choi has like a beard now, but Lex Luthor's beard's the exact same, so I don't know there. He must have took the trimmers with him when he teleported to the vanishing point. But so Barry's back. He looks tired. He looks exhausted. He can't get through the Speed Force. He wants to try and go back, but Sarah and Kara stop him. And then they kind of argue, and then Oliver, or shall I say, Spectre, shows up. And we get a scene of Oliver training with the Jim Corrigan as to be the Spectre on Purgatory, Lian-Yu, or in Purgatory on Lian-Yu. And so Oliver, you know, completes his training, he's ready, so he joins the Paragons in the Vanishing Point. And he mentions that the Speed Force is kind of the key to everything. And it's a good scene, it's nice. You know, they don't know really what the Spectre means, and so they think it's Oliver, and he kind of just says, I'm Oliver, but I'm not really Oliver. I'm something else. And it kind of actually reminded me of Bran Stark from Game of Thrones, where he comes back as the Three-Eyed Raven. He's like, I'm Bran, but I'm more than that. I'm the Three-Eyed Raven. And so that's kind of what Oliver's speech there reminded me of. He's like, I'm Oliver, but I'm more than Oliver. And I'm also the Spectre. And so we get him sort of giving the team sort of a clue on how to get out of here, the vanishing point. So Oliver tells Barry how to get them out of there using the Speed Force. He gives him a tap on the forehead to give him some extra energy, I guess, to break through the Speed Force. And so Barry takes the Paragons through the Speed Force, and he's going to drop off Ryan Choi, Supergirl, and Lex Luthor on planet Maltus so that they can try to stop the Monitor from going back to the dawn of time to begin with, creating the antimatter universe. And then what happens is Sarah, John Jones, Kate, and Oliver and Barry, they get stuck in the Speed Force, and it becomes Barry's kind of mission to try and find them all and take them out of the Speed Force, it's kind of like an interesting little side plot, and it kind of replays past scenes from Arrowverse shows, which is kind of cool. It looks like, they got the actors currently to just refilm old scenes that they had previously done from different angles. So it's kind of doesn't match up 100% to how they looked in the original versions, but it's really actually cool. But of course, Kate is kind of the Kate doesn't really have anything to do with Oliver, and so she's kind of like the outcast looking in on Oliver's conversation with Ray Palmer. And I guess Kate's takeaway from that is that they sort of were enemies at first, or frenemies, but they eventually came to trust each other and both be superheroes in their own right. And so that's kind of her takeaway is she needs to trust people more, I guess, and work with people and let people in so that she can be a good superhero also. And then, of course, through all of this, we get the big cameo of the crossover. We get Ezra Miller's version of the Flash interacting with Grant Gustin's Barry Allen. So I don't know how that happened. Maybe Ezra Miller's version of the Flash was also trying to travel through the Speed Force, and they just kind of got stuck together. I don't know. He does end up disappearing, so I assume he was maybe trying to travel through the Speed Force also to get away from the antimatter wave, but he really couldn't escape it. But it's not a super long scene. It's a couple minutes long. A few little, quippy dialogues back and forth. Ezra Miller thinks Grant Gustin's Flash is cosplaying as him, which is kind of funny. Because, it's the TV suit of the Flash is, I don't like it. I like the Flash's suit from season 1, 2, and even 3 and 4, really. But season 5 was terrible. This season's is slightly better than last season's, but it's still terrible. So it just looks like Power Rangers spandex to me, which I don't like. So I like that he thought it was cosplay because it looks like cheap cosplay. It kind of does. And of course, the movies are going to have bigger budget to make his Flash suit look better. I like Barry's kind of impressed by it. And then apparently Ezra Miller's Barry Allen didn't even think to call himself the Flash, and he got the idea from Grant Gustin's Barry Allen. So that's kind of cool, actually. So that was kind of the big reveal for the crossover, is they finally crossed over the movies with the TV shows. But it's such a small cameo that it doesn't necessarily have to be the Barry Allen from the movies. And since the DCEU is going in a new direction, it probably won't be the same Barry Allen. They'll probably sort of redo Ezra Miller's Barry Allen, kind of like they did with Aquaman, where they just had a small mention that Aquaman was in the Justice League movie, but then they kind of moved on and he just did his own thing. I assume that's what they'll do with Ezra Miller's version of the Flash also. So it was kind of a cool little cameo scene to have. Ultimately, it doesn't really do much, and it's kind of just another cameo. But it is kind of cool to see, and so, I bet a lot of people are probably excited about that. So then we have Supergirl, Ryan Choi, and Lex on planet Maltus, and they're trying to find the Monitor, and Lex kind of goes off on his own thing. Supergirl doesn't trust him, so then it's revealed that Lex, when he switched places with the Paragon, he gave himself a little extra powers. So he knocks out Supergirl and Ryan Choi in a blast. And when they wake up, they find Lex at the Monitor's headquarters, where he's trying to talk the Monitor, or he's actually not trying to talk the Monitor out of doing the experiment. He's trying to talk the Monitor into correcting his experiment so that he can still do it, but it won't create the anti-monitor and the antimatter wave, so that Lex Luthor can then rule the universe. Which is, of course, Kara never trusted him to begin with. Which reminds me of the Monitor says, even Lex Luthor has a role to play, but I don't know if this was Lex Luthor's role to play. I'm not 100% sure what they were doing with the Lex Luthor character to begin with in this crisis. Because, if it was destined that he had a role to play, then the role to play would never change throughout the crisis, but his role seems to constantly be changing throughout the crisis. So what exactly was his role to play in the crisis? If anybody out there knows, please tell me, because I'm actually really curious about it. And maybe I have to rewatch the episode, I don't know, because he wants to, help the Monitor, but then, of course, they end up stopping the Monitor anyway, so that his role to play in that situation didn't work out either. But so that's where Ryan Choi comes in. Supergirl gave him a good pep talk earlier, telling him, he was, confused why he was the paragon of humanity. She gives him a speech, and then he, as the paragon of humanity, is the one to talk to the Monitor and prevent him from doing the experiment. So that sort of stops that crisis from happening. But as we find out, it does not prevent a crisis from happening because there are multiple universes, and in one of those, the Monitor still makes the same choice. So I guess the real solution would be to go to every multiple universe and prevent the Monitor from making that decision. That could have been the real fix. We don't have time to do that, and also we don't want to jump through multiverses anymore. So it works, but not really. And then of course we have Barry grabbing all the Paragons in the Speed Force. So he goes to Sarah's death on Arrow, and again I haven't seen Arrow, or at least I haven't seen up to Sarah's death. So I don't know how that scene originally played out, but I assume they just got the actors to reshoot the scene all over again. And so Barry kind of goes in and he kind of like lightning taps her and she revives and wakes up. She remembers everything. So she's normal Sarah, while Laurel and Diggle are just kind of like a flashback version in the Speed Force. And then, of course, he goes to last year's Elseworlds crossover to grab... Actually, he doesn't grab John Jones there. I think he talks to Oliver. And he finds out that Oliver made the deal with the Monitor that, he would, I think, sacrifice his life if Barry and Kara were to live. And so we kind of just get a replay of the end of Elseworlds a little bit. And then a new scene with Barry talking to Oliver. I do like Lois Lane mentions, did Barry kind of stop the crisis to go upgrade his suit, which is kind of a nice little notice. So he gets the little bit of information from Oliver, and then he goes to find John Jones, and he finds John Jones in the Invasion Crisis crossover, where Oliver is talking to Supergirl, saying, he wants Supergirl to hang back. He doesn't trust her, which was I didn't really care for that scene, I don't think, in the initial Invasion, and I don't know why they picked that scene here. Maybe it was the easiest to replicate, I guess. But so that's where John Jones is, and so Barry grabs all the Paragons and he gets them out of there and he takes them to the dawn of time of the antimatter universe. So all the Paragons end up on the antimatter universe now. So now they have to battle the Shadow Demons and fight the Anti-Monitor. And Oliver is there as the Spectre, and he tells them as Paragons, they're the strongest willed that can hold the line, while Spectre tries to rebirth a new universe. And so we have all the Paragons, even Ryan Choi, going up against the Shadow Demons, taking them out. And it's kind of a cool little battle. It doesn't last very long. The main focus is Spectre trying to fight the Anti-Monitor so that he can rebirth the whole universe, actually sort of like a re-jump, like a restart. And so we get the heroes versus the Shadow Demons. Lex Luthor's got his new upgraded powers. He's killing people. Like I said, Ryan Choi, I think he has like a baton or something that he's going around hitting the Shadow Demons with. I don't understand the Shadow Demons because they look like shadows, and then when they hit them, they just sort of dissipate into shadows. It's not 100% clear if they are like solid matter, and then they hit them and they just like dust like the vampires on Buffy, or if they're just shadow to begin with and just like tapping them or hitting them or whatever, that is what kills them and dissipates them into dust. I'm not 100% clear on the Shadow Demons, how they work. Again, they look, especially when they dust, they look like Dementors from Harry Potter. So if somebody has information on a little more on how the Shadow Demons work, let me know in the comments, please. Because they don't seem to make a whole lot of sense. Like I said, they look like maybe they're like the vampire dust on Buffy when the vampires are staked. So I don't know, but it's a kind of a cool little shot. We get all the Paragons fighting together, and then we get the Spectre in Oliver's form. He says to the Anti-Monitor, he says, "You have failed this universe," which of course is what Oliver Queen says on the Arrow show. He says, to whatever villain he's fighting, he says, "You have failed the city." Here, he's telling the Anti-Monitor, "You have failed this universe." So I like that. It's kind of like a nice little ending for Oliver and kind of a good way to sort of tie up the character. Even though he's the Spectre now, he still has the memories of Oliver, and he's in Oliver's body. So he's again, it's kind of like Bran with the three-eyed raven thing. And then we get Oliver dying again. So we had Oliver's death in the first episode of Crisis, and now we get Oliver as the Spectre dying again. And so I like that Sarah immediately just says to Barry, "Take us up there." And so they go up there, and they're the ones to see Oliver away for a second time, and it's a really nice scene. I do like that. One thing that kind of has been consistent in all of these crossovers, or at least the ones that Sarah's been involved, is her relationship with Oliver. And again, since I haven't really seen, I haven't seen the Arrow show, and I haven't seen her relationship with Oliver on that show develop. And obviously, but I've seen her post, the crossovers, and so it's kind of really touching. It's like, we'll get into it in the next episode, her speech again, but it's sort of fitting that Oliver is surrounded by Barry and Sarah as he dies for a second time. And of course, one thing I've been tracking through all of the crossovers is the relationship between Oliver and Barry. And the one thing that Oliver says to Barry during that Elseworlds scene that's new is he says, Barry, sort of is upset that Oliver, traded his life to save theirs. He says, you're a hero, you need to continue on. And Oliver says basically, dying is the easy part, the hard part is, continuing on as the hero. And so it's kind of an interesting, he says it to him again. They repeat it at the end when Oliver dies again. And so it's kind of interesting to see how far Barry and Oliver's relation has come. And it's kind of at the point where, Barry is no longer relies on Oliver as his mentor or his hero mentor. He just, saw him as just a friend, really, and family. And so it's kind of a sad scene, really. I'm still sad that they killed off Oliver. I'm sad they killed him off twice. We'll see how the Arrow finale. This is not the last episode of Arrow, so we'll see how the finale episode goes. But it is a sad moment, and he ends up giving his life to rebirth a new universe, and that's kind of where the episode leaves off. So I gotta say I've been very critical of the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover so far. The first 3 episodes, I don't even know. This episode, I think, is a step up. I do like it better, especially because I like the team, the interactions between the team members and the Paragons. That's always my favorite part about crossovers. So I think this is a pretty good episode. Of course, it doesn't end the crossover. We have one more episode, but it ends the finality of the Anti-Monitor wiping away all the universes and replaces that with a brand new universe. So, and we'll see the fallout of that in the next episode. So I do like this episode. I'm sad Oliver's gone, but I liked the stuff in the Speed Force with the Flash. The Supergirl stuff with Lex Luthor is kind of like, eh. But, there's a lot of good stuff in here, and so I do like this episode. My favorite part of this episode? Oh, I don't know. I did like Ezra Miller's Flash showing up. I did like the beginning, seeing the Monitor on his home planet. I did like the Paragon stuck in the vanishing point. I don't know, yeah, maybe my favorite scene, if I had to pick one, is it's either going to be Oliver's death, because I really did like that, or Oliver talking to Barry in a new scene from Elseworlds, the Flash and the Speed Force. That might be my favorite scene, actually, because it kind of replays a little bit from Elseworlds, but then we get this new speech from Barry and Oliver, and we don't actually find out, like, they don't replay the scene with Oliver and the Monitor, and they don't, like, play it out what the deal was, but we get Oliver kind of, telling Barry what the deal was, And you get that line of, death is the easy part, the hard part is, continuing on. Which is kind of a good theme, I guess, for heroes, especially in the Arrowverse. And so I do like that part a lot. And we do have Batwoman in here. I guess I forgot to talk about her a little bit. But really, she only has kind of the scene where she learns a lesson. She's there in the fights. She doesn't really have much to do. But I mean, I like that she's incorporated still, and that she is the Paragon. Ryan Choi in the opening voiceover mentions that she just trains all day. She just trains for the fight all day, while John Jones just kind of meditates all day. So it was kind of a good little way to see how each of them were coping in the Vanishing Point. So that was actually a good scene too. The opening with the Vanishing Point was really cool, and I like that. At least Ryan Choi, and Lex Luthor were trying to actively figure out a way to get out of the Vanishing Point. So that was kind of cool. And so yeah, overall this is an okay episode. I think it's maybe the best of the 4 so far. We'll see how next episode, the 5th and final Crisis on Infinite Earths, we'll see how that turns out. But thank you all for listening. I apologize, I have been sick for a while, so that's why it's taken me a long time to get these out. You may notice in my voice I might sound a little sick, so I do apologize for being sick. I'm still sick, I'm getting over it. So this is why it's come out a little bit late. But thank you for being patient. Thank you to all my listeners for listening. Thank you to everybody who's commented. Thank you for the comments. So we will be back with Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 5. And until next time, I'll catch you in the next Crisis. Thank you all for listening. Here are my thoughts on the current episodes of The Flash, Supergirl, and Batwoman. Follow me over on the Stardust app at Crashly87, CRASHLIE87. For those bookworms out there, check out my blog, Fantastic Literature, link in the description below, for book reviews, short story reviews, and general thoughts about the literary industry. And if you like the podcast, be sure to follow, like, and share it. Leave your thoughts in the comments below.